Hi, this is Karolina Sieler, a former law lecturer here in London, as well as the founder of a website called firstclasslb.com. Today I want to talk to you about how you can take notes from the law textbooks that are being recommended at your courses. A lot of students come to me with the same problem, which is when they start taking notes, it just turns out that there's so much to note down that they end up copying large pieces of text from the textbooks and just putting them in their notebooks or putting them in a Word document. And then at the end of it, when they start revising for exams, they really struggle with narrowing down the content of their notes and finding out a way of revising it effectively. So for that reason, I want to tell you about 4 different steps that you should follow to make sure that you are able to take notes from law textbooks effectively. The first step is basically a slightly negative step. I'm going to tell you not to do, first of all. And what you should not be doing is you should not be copying large pieces of text from your law textbooks and then copying and pasting them into a Word document or just trying to note them down in a notebook. Honestly, it just will not work. If you open any given chapter in a proper textbook, I'm not talking about those basics books that are very small and thin and just have the basic content about each topic, but if you open a proper law textbook, it will really have a lot of information in there. A single chapter on a topic can have between 30 up to even 100 cases in some situations, and a certain number of statute sections as well. So it's really not possible, if you think about the fact that when you're going to be writing an answer during your exam on that specific topic, you're probably going to use between 6 to 10 cases in that answer only. So what you should try to do is you should try to approach the whole situation a bit more strategically, thinking, okay, so I know that I need to come up with a revision note that's going to have about maybe 10 to 12 cases in it, or 3 to 4 to 6 statute sections depending on the area of law and its specific topic. So it's a given that you're not going to be able to copy and paste information about all of those cases that are in the textbook. What you should try to do is you should focus on the ones that are most important, and you're going to figure it out because you will see how much is written about those cases in the textbooks. If there's a lot of information in the textbook on a specific case, rather than it being mentioned, let's say, in the footnotes only, then you know that this is a case that is worth mentioning. You should also look at what's happening during your lectures and what types of cases, which cases are your lecturers mentioning during the lectures, and those cases are the cases you should be focusing on. The same applies to statute sections. You should just pick the most important ones. So rather than copying and pasting information about like every single case and about every single statute section, you should just select the ones that are the most important ones and then try to put some information in a Word document or in your textbook, in your notebook. You're also not meant to just literally write word by word sentences from the textbook, because the chances are that you might not later on understand them, and also chances are that if you're trying to do that, it's because you actually don't understand what the textbook is saying about a specific case or a statute section. So see if you can try to paraphrase it, and especially if there are 3-4 sentences written about a specific case, see if you can figure out the gist of it, the main thing about what the textbook is saying about that specific case, and put it in a single sentence in your revision note. So the next tip that I can give you, the next step is once you know that you're not meant to copy and paste large chunks of text from the textbook into your notes, you need to start scanning through the textbook for 3 types of things: the definitions, the cases, and the statutes. So cases and statute sections are quite obvious. With statutes, though, make sure that you're focusing on sections rather than just the name of a statute. It's not going to really help you much to write a first-class law exam answer if you're just going to say, oh, the Human Rights Act talks about this and that, but you don't mention specific sections. So make sure you focus on the sections and put them in your revision notes rather than just the name of the act, like Human Rights Act 1998. The definitions are basically just key explanations of very key concepts in each topic. Each topic has between 1 to 5 of them, I would say. So if you talk about parliamentary sovereignty in constitutional administrative law, you are likely to have to provide the definition of what parliamentary sovereignty is in your exam answer. So you should write down the concept of parliamentary sovereignty and then just write a short explanation about it. But remember that you're, again, not trying to put everything within your notes. You're literally just scanning through the textbook. You can read it the first time so that you understand and you kind of get used to the idea of, get used to the terminology used in the textbook, in the chapter, and also so that you understand the main gist of it, the whole context of the chapter. But when you read it the first time, you shouldn't be taking notes. You should just do it very in a very relaxed way. Let's say rather than trying to sit at a desk, you can, I don't know, sit on a couch, turn it into your evening read in bed or something like this. So try to be as relaxed as possible when you're actually properly reading the textbook. But then when you start revising, when you start studying for the exam from the textbook, you should open the chapter and avoid reading the whole thing again. Just literally scan through the chapter and look for the definitions of the key concepts and the cases and the statutes. Once you find those, the best way is to highlight them in your textbook. I know it's slightly damaging to the textbook, but then again, you're probably the only person that's ever going to use it anyway. And it really, really helps when you just highlight the relevant bits, so that you're not kind of constantly going back and forth between the textbook and the notes and trying to note down, because you're going to lose your focus a lot during that process. But if you highlight first and then try to transfer it into a Word document or on a piece of paper, it's just going to take much less time and you're going to be much more focused on the process when you kind of divide it into different steps in that way. And the final process is, once you have everything highlighted in your textbook, that's the time, only at that point is the time when you should be taking out your notebook and trying to note down the things that you highlighted. Again, trying to paraphrase them rather than writing them down word by word. And if you apply this system, it's a little bit tricky to get used to at the beginning, because usually the students want to just kind of do the notes on a first reading. So they think to themselves, oh, I'm going to start reading this chapter, I'm going to do it very, very carefully, and then as I'm doing that, I'm going to take the notes. But the reality is that it actually takes much, much longer, rather than you just quickly reading through the chapter the first time when you're relaxed, and then sitting down and kind of going, okay, so I need 10 to 12 cases, I need 5 to 6 statute sections, and I need 1 to 5 definitions for this topic. Which ones are the most important ones? Let me highlight them, and then let me paraphrase them and put them down in a note. And it also saves you time later on. If you apply this process, it saves you time later on when you start doing revisions, because majority of the students who don't use this system, when it gets to the revision time before the exams, they actually have to do double the work, because they go through their notes again and they are trying to figure out, because they've taken notes that are very, very extensive and they've copied and pasted a lot from the textbook. When it comes to the exam time, they have to actually go through the notes first again and try to narrow them down. And that really, really doesn't work. It just takes a lot of time, and you're kind of getting involved with a lot of cases and statute sections that you probably are not going to be mentioning or revising, mentioning in your notes or revising before the actual exam. So it's just really unnecessary work for you to be doing. So yeah, my advice is really strongly for you to apply this specific system when you're taking your notes throughout the term. Now, I, apart from recording those videos here on YouTube, I also have several courses that help law students in getting a first in their law essays and their law exams. So especially in this context, I think you might find it very useful to have a look at the law exam, the first class law exam revision course that I'm going to provide a link to down below. It does provide a lot more explanation about just how to succeed in law exams, how to get a first, and really without spending so much time on revising the content, which frankly not many students have these days. So feel free to check this out if this sounds like something interesting.